Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Jim Harbaugh is staying put in Ann Arbor. Joining me to discuss that and more today is beat writer Austin Meek from The Athletic. First, a few news and notes to get us started. For 5 weeks, we've been waiting to find out if Jim was signing his new contract or bolting for the NFL. Well, he flew up to Minneapolis Wednesday morning, met for 9 hours with Vikings management, then reportedly called Ward Manuel and said he was staying at Michigan for as long as they would have him. What happened in Minneapolis? We may never know. I'm sure we'll learn more details, though, in the coming days and weeks. For now, Jim is back, and he has plenty of work to do. He needs to settle on a new defensive coordinator and get back in recruiting mode and probably even mend a few fences along the way. Juwan Howard and Michigan basketball have won 3 of their last 4. Other than the Indiana win in Bloomington, they continue to be a very inconsistent team, though. Unless things change, we might not make it to the big dance this March. Joining me on our Game Day segment to talk Jim Harbaugh and Michigan hoops is beat writer Austin Meek from The Athletic. So stay with us. Here with us on our Game Day segment this week to talk Michigan football, and of course you know what that means, Jim Harbaugh, and also a little Michigan basketball, is Austin Meek from The Athletic. Great to have you with us, Austin.
Hey, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, despite how crazy it's been for all of us who cover Michigan in the last couple of weeks, really. Last 24 hours have been interesting, though. I mean, you start to wonder, does Jim Harbaugh really just thrive on chaos? It's been 5 weeks, but Wednesday evening, when most of us thought he was heading back to the NFL, he spurns the Vikings and lets Ward Manuel know he's coming back. That was a crazy 24 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the last month has confirmed for all of us that there's really nobody who knows what's happening inside Jim Harbaugh's mind except for Jim Harbaugh. Maybe John Harbaugh, but most of us are just guessing about what he's going to do, and he has a way of keeping everybody on edge. I think you're right that he is a unique person in the sense that he really thrives in the midst of chaos. So when everybody around him is feeling nervous or anxious about what he's going to do, he seems perfectly at peace with that. And he certainly kept everybody guessing here until the very end. But we have our answer, which is nice. I certainly was ready to have some resolution on this.
Oh, absolutely. I think everyone was. 9 hours, just a really long interview process. I'm not sure if that's the norm for a head coaching interview in the NFL, but do we even know if it got to the point where they made him an offer, or that didn't happen?
My understanding from what's been reported by colleagues that cover the Vikings is that there was no formal offer made to Jim Harbaugh, which is not a surprise. You know, typically the coach who gets the job is often the only one who gets the formal offer. And there's a lot of conversations leading up to that point where if it becomes clear that the two sides are not matching up, then typically it doesn't get to that formal offer stage. So in terms of what happened, it's a great question. I think we'll probably learn more about that as time goes on. All I can say is that there were a lot of people around Michigan who felt that as soon as Jim Harbaugh got on that plane, he probably was not coming back. And then something happened over the course of that 9-hour interview where the two sides realized that it wasn't going to be a fit, and now he's coming back.
Getting back to his contract that's been waiting, my understanding was that before this interview took place with the Minnesota Vikings on Wednesday, Jim's revised contract was done and just waiting for his signature. Is that your understanding too?
That is my understanding from everybody I've talked to. There have been productive conversations between Jim Harbaugh and Michigan. This wasn't a situation of Jim Harbaugh trying to leverage Michigan for something more because the contract had been essentially agreed to and just needed his signature. I think it's going to be a fair contract that puts him in the company of coaches in the Big Ten who have accomplished similar things, whether that's Ryan Day or James Franklin. You know, obviously, The contract that Mel Tucker signed at Michigan State really reset the coaching market this year in the Big Ten, and that probably is part of this, that everybody had to kind of adjust based on a deal that was far and away above what the market had been in the Big Ten. But I think when all the dust settles, we'll see Jim Harbaugh paid at a level that's consistent with his accomplishments, and with the opportunity that if Michigan has another year like they had this year, then he'll be right up there with the highest paid coaches in the country.
One of the questions that I've been getting from fans the last couple of weeks, last 5 weeks, Austin, is they've wondered, with the Jim situation going to the NFL, the story that it just seemed to go on and on. Do you think there's any way it's going to negatively impact recruiting in the 2023 class, or is there plenty of time to repair from that?
What I would say about recruiting is that I'm not sure that players care quite as much about that storyline as maybe fans do. I think that if you're a player who is being recruited by a school like Michigan, you understand that the coaching carousel is crazy every single season. I mean, just look at this year with Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame for LSU and Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma for USC. These things happen every single year. And so the speculation that, this guy might leave, with the exception of maybe a couple coaches like Nick Saban and maybe Kirby Smart, there's not a single coach in the country who is not involved in some of that speculation. And I think players understand that. And maybe there will be some who feel like Jim Harbaugh openly exploring the NFL is a negative, or I'm sure there will be more questions about that in recruiting. But I really think players are just so used to that now that if the coach is there and he's in your living room and you have a good relationship with him, the speculation about is he going to stay or is he going to go, I'm not sure that weighs quite as heavily with the players.
Well, it was an interesting 5 weeks of rumors and stories, though, that we just went through. And, as long as Jim is here, we could do this all over again next year. Isn't that right?
It's certainly possible. The original reporting that was out there after this news broke was that Jim Harbaugh had expressed that he didn't want to do this again every year,
yeah.
Which is certainly good news, I think, for all of us who felt pretty worn out by this. We'll see. I think, first of all, we'll have to look at the contract and say what's the buyout if he were to leave for the NFL. That'll be the first clue, I think. One thing to consider is Jim Harbaugh is 58, and he may have looked at this as really his last window of opportunity to explore a return to the NFL, because we're seeing the trend in the NFL is coaches who are hired in the NFL are getting younger. A lot of these teams, and the Vikings did it as well, are hiring younger coordinators, a lot of first-time head coaches in the NFL. And really the model of the way the organization is run, the role of the head coach and the GM, it's evolving a little bit away from what it was where the head coach was the person who had the most power in the organization. So all that to say, I do think as time goes on, Jim Harbaugh may not be as involved in the rumors every single year in the NFL hiring cycle. And it may be that, he's looking at this as he wanted to explore this while the window was open. Mm-hmm. And now he feels like he can sign this contract at Michigan and think about this as his last coaching job.
Well, one more football question before we switch gears to talk a little Michigan hoops, Austin. I would think Jim's first plan of action now is getting the defensive coordinator position filled. That is something he has to move on pretty quickly, I would think.
Yeah, obviously you need to have a coordinator in place for the start of spring ball.
Yeah,
that's really the last piece of the puzzle now that needs to come together. And I think that there are some good options. I think they'll look internally. Somebody like Steve Clinkscale, I think, certainly deserves a look. If they decide to go outside, there are some people with Michigan ties that I think would be worthy. We've heard Larry Foote's name as a great former player at Michigan who's been in the NFL. and could potentially could be a candidate. And also there are some coaches who may not have ties to Michigan, but whether it's coaches on the Ravens staff or just up and coming defensive coordinators around the country, I think there's going to be some good options. And you're right, I think they need to get that settled pretty quick, because Michigan's just kind of been stuck in limbo for the last month, and it's time to get moving now and start thinking about 2022.
Absolutely, and I'm sure we'll hear plenty of that in the coming days and weeks. Switching gears to basketball, though, Austin, Michigan came very close to losing at home to Nebraska on Tuesday night, but they did just enough to hold on. That was not a pretty game to watch, though, was it?
No, it's been a struggle. Every time you think that this Michigan basketball team is getting ready to turn the corner, they end up right back where they started. It seems like they put together a nice stretch there with 3 wins in a row going into the Michigan State game, and it felt like maybe there was a spark there that they were getting ready to turn it on and go on a winning streak. But that was a disappointing second half for sure in that loss at Michigan State, and that really put Michigan back in the position now of trying to start over and get that momentum going again, and that can be a hard thing to do. And Hunter Dickinson had foul trouble in the first half against Nebraska, and obviously it's a very different Michigan team when Hunter Dickinson isn't out there. So it's just they're fighting through it. It's been hard to string together even a couple weeks of solid performances without a step backwards.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it just seems like this team can't put together a full 40 minutes.
Yeah, that certainly was the case against Michigan State, against Nebraska. They played a good first half against Michigan State and then fell apart in the second half. They played they didn't look good in the first half against Nebraska, and then put together a good second half to ultimately win the game. That win in Indiana, I thought, was probably Michigan's most complete game of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think coming off of that Indiana game, there was some optimism, like, hey, the light is coming on now. They've figured some things out. They figured out how to play a full 40 minutes, but then they come and they play Northwestern, and it's just it's a dogfight from start to finish. And until they can figure out how to string together, more than just a good game or a good half, I think that this is going to be a pretty frustrating Michigan basketball team, basically the way it's been all season.
Very tough team to watch right now, where there seems to be no flow in the offense and a lot of talent. It's just not clicking yet, so we just have to give it time. And this next stretch of games, Austin, really tough. At Purdue on Saturday, then on the road Tuesday against Penn State, then back on Thursday against Purdue again, and then Ohio State at home. Michigan has got to find a way to, you would think, win a couple of those games, don't they?
Yeah, the thing I've been saying throughout this season is that even though it doesn't look like they're in a great position right now, they're not in a great position, but the Big Ten schedule in February is going to give some opportunities for the type of wins that put you in the NCAA tournament. And it's really going to come down for Michigan to can you steal some of those wins? And these games against Purdue, that's a great opportunity. And we know in college basketball that sometimes it's as simple as you get one win, and that can ignite things. And even though Michigan's really struggled up to this point, if they get one of those games against Purdue, the picture starts to look different. So there's still a path for Michigan to be in the NCAA tournament, and I think that's the goal now. The idea of winning the Big Ten, I think probably that needs to be put on the back burner now, and just think about is there a way to get to the NCAA tournament? And I think that path is still there, but they're going to have to get some of these games against the best teams in the Big Ten.
Oh, absolutely. There's going to be plenty of opportunities in February and then early March. Right now, I think we'll be 5-4 in the Big Ten. Do you think it's going to be at least 11 wins to get into the tournament, and maybe a win or two in the Big Ten tournament?
Yeah, I think there have been some teams that have made the NCAA tournament with a losing record in the Big Ten. Michigan State did it last year. They were a first 4 team, even though they had a losing record in the Big Ten. But what they had that really made the difference was they had some really good wins. So, it depends on what the record is, and it also depends on how you get there. Michigan didn't get a lot out of the non-conference schedule. That's gonna really give them a boost at tournament time. So, I think certainly 500 in the Big Ten. If you've got some really good wins mixed in there, I think that's probably a starting point. So if Michigan wins 7 of their last games and then puts together a decent run in the Big Ten tournament, then I feel like they'd probably be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I agree with that. Final question before we let you get away, Austin. Before the season started, when you look back now, expectations were very high for this Michigan team, very unrealistically. And, a lot of that was because of the returning talent and then hearing about this top-ranked recruiting class coming in. And I think what we're seeing is, just because we have 4- and 5-star freshmen, it doesn't mean that they come in and they're ready to go. It takes time to develop, doesn't it?
It does, and it depends a lot on the player. There are some really highly ranked players who come into college out of high school and are ready to be really big-time, high-impact players at the college level. There's also some really good players who come out of high school and are role players at the college level. And it doesn't mean that they're not talented. It doesn't mean that, they're a bust or anything like that. It just means that, at this point in their career, they're probably a role player on a college team. And I think that's kind of where Michigan is with, Caleb Houston is an incredibly talented player. He's going to have a great basketball career. He's just not a guy who's going to carry the team every night as a freshman. And Moussa Diabate is, he's fun to watch. He's high energy, great athlete, going to have a great basketball career, but he's not necessarily going to carry the team every night either. And so that's just, that's where Michigan is right now. And it's been tough to put the pieces together in a way that allows Michigan to play consistent basketball every night. But the good thing is when you have that talent, there is always the potential. I just think that, as long as they have games left on the schedule, there's still that possibility that the light's going to come on and they're going to go on a run. And that's what can happen when you have a young team with a lot of talent. And that's where Michigan is right now.
Absolutely. A big stretch coming up next week. And as you said, plenty of opportunities. Here with us on our Game Day segment this week, talking about the big Jim Harbaugh story that broke Wednesday evening last night, is Austin Meek from The Athletic. Austin, always a pleasure having you on the show. Continue the great work in The Athletic, and we look forward to that next visit.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
On Quick Hits today, Juwan Howard and his team will be in action on Saturday against number 4 Purdue down in West Lafayette. We stay on the road Tuesday taking on Penn State in Happy Valley. Women's basketball had their game with Illinois canceled because of the snow. It will be rescheduled at a later date. They will be home this Saturday, though, taking on number 22 Iowa. Coach Barnes-Arico and her team are 10-1 in the Big Ten, 19-2 overall, heading into this weekend's play. Hockey will be back in action next Friday, February 11th. The Spartans will be paying a visit to Yost, and then both teams will head to Detroit for the duel in the D at the LCA the next night. Michigan is 12-6 in Big Ten play, 27-1 overall. When you look out the window anywhere in the Midwest, but especially here in Metro Detroit, it's hard to believe softball and baseball season gets underway next weekend. Softball will be down in Tampa, playing in the USF tournament, and baseball actually opens the week after in the College Baseball Showdown in Arlington, Texas, so it is right around the corner. That will do it for today. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone, and thanks for joining me. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!